Okay, so are you ready to dive into some seriously out there medical stuff? Because today we're talking about the possibility of breathing through your intestines.
Yeah, it sounds pretty wild, right?
Wild doesn't even begin to describe it. I mean, how could that even work? You sent over some research on this, and I gotta say, my curiosity is definitely piqued.
Well, it's based on a procedure researchers call enteral ventilation via the anus, or EVA for short.
EVA. Okay, got it. So, how is that even a thing?
So it all comes down to this liquid called perfluorodecalan, and it can carry a remarkable amount of oxygen. And scientists are looking into introducing this oxygen-rich liquid, into the rectum.
Okay, so many questions. But okay, I'm going with you.
And our intestines are really good at absorbing things. It's how we get nutrients from food.
Right. So researchers are basically trying to use that same process to get oxygen straight into the bloodstream.
So you're saying if someone's lungs weren't working, their intestines could sort of take over. That's kind of incredible and also kind of scary at the same time. Yeah, and the early research is showing some promising results. They've done tests on pigs who were deprived of oxygen, and EVA really helped boost their oxygen levels.
So how much are we talking about here?
Well, in one study, pigs who were using EVA were able to keep decent oxygen levels for about 18 minutes.
18 minutes, huh? I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but in a crisis, that could make all the difference in the world.
Right, like stabilizing someone who can't breathe until you can get them help.
Exactly. That's the idea. It's not a permanent solution, but more like a bridge to get you to a more permanent solution.
Okay, I have to ask, because I know everyone is thinking it. Is this safe? It doesn't exactly sound like a walk in the park.
Totally valid question. It's the first thing everyone asks, and for good reason. The good news is, so far, animal studies haven't shown any really bad side effects. It seems like the perfluorodecalan stays in the intestines and doesn't cause any harm or leak into the blood.
Okay, that's reassuring, I guess. But we're still a long way off from this being used regularly, right? Oh, absolutely. This kind of research takes a lot of time and careful consideration. Human trials haven't even started yet. And it's important to remember that these early results are promising. But we need a lot more research to really understand the risks and benefits before it would ever be used in a clinical setting.
Right, of course. I definitely wouldn't want someone messing around with this stuff before it's been thoroughly tested.
Chuckles. And, speaking of real-world applications, think about what happened at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Remember how scarce ventilators were and how overwhelmed hospitals were? A situation like that could potentially benefit from an alternative like EVA.
Oh, wow, that's a really good point. Even if it's just temporary, it could save lives when there aren't enough ventilators to go around. Are there other situations where this could be a game changer?
Yeah, definitely. Think about like disaster relief. Remote areas where it's hard to get medical care. Basically anywhere the traditional ventilation is difficult or impossible.
Okay, this is getting really interesting. So it's not just about replacing ventilators then.
Right. It's about changing the way we think about respiratory care in general.
Okay, now you're really getting my attention. What else could we use EVA for?
Well, imagine the possibilities for treating chronic conditions, like, say, COPD or cystic fibrosis, diseases that make it really hard to breathe. EVA could be a way to treat those conditions that's less invasive and maybe even more effective than things like oxygen tanks or other therapies.
Wow, that would be huge for so many people. So we're talking about better quality of life for people with chronic conditions and maybe even saving lives in emergencies. This research has so much potential.
It really does.
Hmm.
And this might sound crazy, but EVA could even have implications for space exploration.
Wait, really? Space? I don't see the connection.
Think about it. Space travel is all about pushing the limits of what humans can do. You need totally new and innovative ways to survive and thrive in such an extreme environment. And EVA could be a way to make sure there's enough oxygen in spacecraft, especially on really long missions.
Okay, you're blowing my mind now. Astronauts breathing through. It's kind of mind-boggling. But this all makes me wonder about the ethical side of things. If this actually becomes a reality, are there concerns about using EVA ethically?
That's a really important question, and one that the scientific community takes very seriously. Like any new medical technology, especially one as different as this, ethical considerations are a really big deal. We have to be careful and
Right.
responsible.
So what does that look like? Where do we even begin?
It starts with doing a lot of research to really get a handle on not just the good stuff, but also any potential long-term effects. We need to have clear rules for using it, especially in emergencies. And of course, making sure everyone has equal access to this kind of technology is super important.
That makes sense. Something this groundbreaking is bound to come with a whole new set of things to consider. It's not just about whether we can do it, but whether we should do it and how to do it the right way.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that's what I find so interesting about this research. It's not just about pushing the boundaries of medicine. It's about pushing the boundaries of how we think about ethics, philosophy, and what it means to be human.
This deep dive has definitely taken us to some unexpected places. We started with what seemed like a pretty crazy idea, and now we're talking about space travel and the future of humanity. But there's one more thing about EVA we need to talk about, and it might be the most mind-blowing thing yet. Okay, now you've really got me wondering. What is it? What's so mind-blowing?
So we've talked about the immediate uses for EVA, but what if this could change how we think about the human body's ability to adapt?
Adapt. You mean like our bodies could actually learn to breathe better through...
Our bodies are incredibly adaptable. We see it all the time throughout human history. Like take the Bajau people of Southeast Asia. They've adapted to dive deep underwater, holding their breath for a really long time.
How long?
Minutes. And their spleens are much larger than ours because they store oxygenated red blood cells.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. It's like something out of a comic book. Humans with superpowers.
Yeah.
So you're saying that using EVA could cause similar adaptations, even if it takes generations?
It's definitely a possibility, although we are talking about changes that would happen over a very long period of time.
Oh.
This is where EVA goes from a really cool medical procedure to a potential look into the future of human evolution. What if we could use this ability to adapt, not just to treat illnesses, but to explore new places and survive in places we never thought possible?
That's incredible to think about, that we could be on the verge of such a huge shift in how we see the human body.
It really is. And that leads us to one of the most exciting and potentially controversial implications of this whole thing, if EVA does have the power to make these sorts of adaptations.
So we're talking about our bodies adapting, maybe even doing things we never thought possible. What's controversial about that?
Well, it makes you wonder what it even means to be human. If we can control our own evolution even by accident, where do we draw the line?
Wow. That's a pretty deep question. It's like we're not just doctors anymore. We're like engineers of the human race. I can definitely see how that could cause some debate.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's something we really need to be talking about as we do this research. But let's just take a second to think about how far we've come. We started this deep dive talking about breathing through your intestines, and we all thought that was crazy.
And now my mind is totally blown. It's like we went from a science lab to a philosophy class in the span of an hour.
That's what I love about science. It makes you question everything you thought you knew and takes you in directions you never could have imagined.
I'm with you there. So if you could sum up today's deep dive, what would be the one big takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's the incredible adaptability of the human body.
Mm-hmm.
EVA might seem strange at first, but it just goes to show how much potential we have to adapt and thrive in ways we never expected.
That's a great point. And if there's one thing I hope everyone listening takes away from this, it's to never underestimate the power of science and human ingenuity. Who knows what other amazing discoveries are just around the corner? We'll keep exploring those right here on the Deep Dive.